Fantasy Freaks and Geeks. What's going on? James Coe here with you. You're listening to me on a Thursday. So it is time now to talk sleepers. But before we get to that, we do got to talk about the news of the day, which is, of course, the big one here is that the Indianapolis Colts are going back to Anthony Richardson. Look, I was in favor of Anthony Richardson being moved to the bench so that he could learn. I like Shane Steichen. I think Shane Steichen is a damn good coach. What in the hell are you doing, Shane Steichen? What are we doing out here? I don't understand this move, at all. Unless this is the front office coming down and saying, Shane, you got to make this move. It feels very much like you're losing control of this situation. It feels very much like you're losing control of your team. This very much feels like the first step to getting fired. Again, I was all in favor of benching Richardson because, quite frankly, he had not played good enough. A 44% completion rate. You've never seen a starting quarterback with a 44% completion rate. You've never seen it. We'd have to go back to like the leather helmet days, back when there was like 8 teams in the NFL. It wasn't even called the NFL back then. We'd have to go back. We'd have to go back to when they were wearing newspapers for shoes. Okay? 44%? That's shockingly bad. But why was I in favor of benching Richardson? Because again, he hadn't played good enough, and they had a Super Bowl winning veteran quarterback playing behind him that he could learn from. Operative word, learn. What could Anthony Richardson have possibly have learned over these last 2 weeks? And by the way, it is never a good thing when you say Joe Flacco is your guy or somebody is your guy, and 2 days later you're like, you know what, just kidding. Actually, he's not my guy. We're going to go back to this young guy. You can't do that. Shoot, if you want to make the move after this game, even that is more defensible than turning around in a 48-hour period and completely changing your mind. Come on, man. Shane, you're too good for this. Shane, you're too smart for this. You're falling into the trap. Don't do it, Shane. Don't do it. Unbelievable. Like I said, I think Shane's a good coach. I think Shane Steichen's a hell of a coach, honestly. But this move made no sense. And the timing of it couldn't be worse. You can't go out there and say Joe Flacco's your guy, and then 48 hours later, he's not your guy. All of a sudden, your veracity as a coach, all of a sudden, your, credibility as a man coach starts to get questioned just a little bit, man. I don't know. Crazy move, I think, by Indianapolis to make this move when they made it. Again, if Joe Flacco goes out there and absolutely burns the team down, of course, then you're going to feel way better about making that move. I don't know, man. This was crazy. From a fantasy perspective, this is why you tune in. From a fantasy perspective, there's just no way to spin this as a positive for anyone other than Anthony Richardson. Jonathan Taylor's kind of sort of been immune to this all, right? He's been not really impacted by any of the quarterback changes. He's just been producing. He's been great. When he's out there, he's been great. Obviously, he's been hurt at different times, and that's kind of sort of banged you. But when he's out there, he's scoring touchdowns. He's, picking up yardage. He's fine. So again, I go back to the fact that Richardson has an amazingly bad 44.4% completion rate. He's got 9 turnovers in 6 games. Now, I don't know how much we're playing Anthony Richardson. I don't think we are. I could make the case that you should go pick him up because he's got some kind of rushing upside. I don't even want to say floor because he doesn't have a floor. His floor is like 3 points. His floor stinks, but he has rushing upside. It's possible, just like we saw with Bryce Young, that Bryce Young just needed a little bit of a breather. He comes back mentally refreshed. And, man, you can't tell me Bryce Young's not playing good. I guess I wouldn't say he's playing good, but he's playing much better than he was, right? Does Richardson come back after that 2-week breather and play much better? We'll find out. I bring up the 9 turnovers because, one, that's obviously not good for Richardson, his fantasy value, but 2, that's just a lot of failed drives. We need drives that end in points. We need drives that, even from a field goal perspective, okay, we could score some points here. We got to score some touchdowns. But when you have 9 turnovers in 6 games, those are a lot of drives that end up with nothing, right? So I bring that up. The 44% completion rate. Dude, I mean, with the injury and the quarterback change, Michael Pittman is not playable. I'm not dropping him unless he goes on IR, then I drop him. But if he's not on IR, but maybe he's active, I'm not playing him. I'm not playing Michael Pittman. That's crazy talk. Why would you do that? No way. Josh Downs is playable as a low-end flex, but highly volatile player. I mean, again, he could give you 2 or 3. He could give you 20. Shoot, he can't give you 20. He can give you 15. No question, increased volatility. No question that he is playable but downgraded. So he's the only player. Now, maybe it's decent for Alec Pierce. They clearly had some kind of thing off script and deep downfield, but obviously Alec Pierce is a very volatile fantasy asset as well. So again, that's the fantasy spin. I think you guys kind of sort of already figured that. So anyways, let's move on. We'll stay with the quarterback talk and talk about sleeper quarterbacks. I'm going to start there with Russell Wilson taking on Baltimore. Can't get a better matchup. You can't. I mean, Baltimore's just been absolutely racked through the air. All season long. They've given up 20-plus fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks in 5 of their last 6 games. We just saw Joe Burrow hammer them for 4 touchdowns. Since reclaiming the starting spot there in Pittsburgh, Russell Wilson, man, he has been on an insane run. He has scored 3 touchdowns in 2 of his 3 games played. 3 touchdowns in 2 of his 3 games played. Now, I do have some concern because let's be real, those 50-50 balls, oh my goodness, he has been on the extreme side of positive variance. There is definitely a scenario where he goes and plays the Baltimore Ravens and he throws 4 picks just because of variance, and that stuff has to even out. That being said, I don't think that's going to happen. Not with Kyle Hamilton all banged up. Nope. I don't think it's going to happen. But it could, because Russell Wilson right now has been getting, I'm just going to use plain terminology. He has just been getting lucky. He has. Period. I mean, you could say skill makes the luck or something. I'm sure. Yeah. All right. I can buy that. But he's definitely gotten lucky. I mean, let's be real here, dude. But the matchup doesn't get any better, man. The Baltimore Ravens have just been getting absolutely gashed through the air. Plus, you add in Mike Williams. I mean, shoot, that adds some upside there for Russell Wilson as well. So he's one of my favorite sleepers. Streaming quarterbacks this week is Russell Wilson, obviously against Baltimore. Justin Herbert against Cincinnati. Cincinnati has not been good defensively because they're just down so many pieces here. And I say Justin Herbert, there's a bunch of people saying, sleeper king, come on, bruh. You're supposed to be the quote-unquote sleeper king. What you doing out here? Justin Herbert's not a sleeper. All right, fine. I get it. He doesn't feel like a sleeper. I get that. But to be fair, Justin Herbert is a quarterback 19 on the season. I mean, QB 19 on the season. How does that not qualify as a sleeper? Anyways, we're going to go with it. The Bengals have given up the 5th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. The Chargers have opened up the offense quite a bit recently. Herbert has averaged a clean 30 pass attempts over his last 5 games. That compared to just 22.8 pass attempts in his first 4 games of the season. So they have ramped up the passing production here over the last 5 games. And again, over his last 4 games, Justin Herbert averaging 19.5 fantasy points per contest. Dude, he's a top 8 fantasy quarterback in total and per game scoring over the last month. That's pretty good. By the way, I would also bet the overs on his passing totals, 239.5. This is a sneaky one, if you can find it. I really like his rushing prop as well. 8.5 is the line that I'm seeing. It's not available everywhere. And this prop probably will fluctuate here a little bit, just depending on what book you go to. But 8.5 is a number that I saw, right? Cincinnati has been stung by mobile quarterbacks. Lamar, Jalen Hurts, and Jaden Daniels have all smashed the Bengals on the ground. Now, I understand Herbert's not on that level of a runner, but let's also not make it seem like he can't use his legs. Let's also not make it seem like he's some statuesque pocket quarterback either, okay? Because he can get out and scoot here. He is coming off of a 32-yard rushing performance. He's averaging 18 rush yards per game over his last 4 games. Again, over under 8.5. Come on now. I like it. I think he's been running a lot more too ever since he's gotten healthy from that early season ankle injury. I talked about Bo Nix in a previous episode, but I'll quickly gloss over it. I really like Bo Nix against Atlanta. He's had 2+ touchdowns in 4 of his last 6 games. He's also scored 17+ fantasy points in 4 of his last 6 games. He's been really solid. I mean, again, not gangbusters, but really solid overall as a fantasy quarterback and as a real life quarterback as well. The Broncos are taking on Atlanta, and the Falcons have given up 2+ passing touchdowns in 6 straight weeks. Bo Nix has been solid. Atlanta has been giving up production. When those two things meet, Bo Nix, very interesting sleeper play this week. All right, Aaron Rodgers against the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts' pass defense has been better recently, but overall, I just think they're not very good. They allowed the 8th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, the 68.8% completion rate allowed. That is 5th worst in the NFL, meaning they are giving up some easy completions. I bring up this number because I think that is extremely good for Aaron Rodgers, who right now is absolutely struggling to connect with his receivers. 62.4 completion rate this year for Aaron Rodgers. That's his lowest since 2019. And it's the 4th lowest since becoming a starter in his entire career, right? 4th lowest in his career since becoming a starter. He is struggling to complete passes. So when the Indianapolis Colts are allowing nearly 69% completion rate, very nice, that's something you got to take notice of. All right, Tua Tagovailoa versus the Las Vegas Raiders. I just mentioned the Raiders, and everyone's like, Tua Tagovailoa. There you go. LV has not been good through the air from a pass defense, right? They've given up the 9th most fantasy points per game to quarterback, and they have allowed 19 plus fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks in 4 of their last 5 games. Tua Tagovailoa getting healthier, getting more reacclimated. Man, can Tyreek Hill's wrist hold up? Can Jalen Waddle actually step forward and do something this year? I don't know, man. It's been crazy. It has especially been crazy in regards to Jalen Waddle. But still, I like Tua Tagovailoa versus Las Vegas. Maybe it's a get-right week for them this week. All right, finally, Jameis Winston taking on the New Orleans Saints. And you're going to look at your matchup sheet and you're going to say, wait a second now. The Saints have allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to quarterback. What are we doing out here with Jameis Winston? Let me just say, there's a lot of numbers that point to a potential Winston breakthrough here. New Orleans has the 5th worst quarterback pressure rate, and they also allow the 5th most passing yards. It just hasn't translated to huge fantasy production against them yet. But remember, this is a defense that is sans Marshawn Lattimore now, and they have tended to give up big plays. Those big plays just haven't necessarily turned into touchdowns, like I said. But overall, they're bottom 10 in yards and receptions allowed on deep passes this year. If all of that sounds like it meshes perfectly with what Jameis Winston likes to do, you would not be alone. Because in my opinion, I think it meshes. I mean, you can't ask for these stats to line up better for Jameis Winston. I like it. I like it a lot. I think Cedric Wilson's going to have a whale of a football game. I like Elijah Moore as a deep sleeper. Jerry Jeudy is going to be a sleeper on my wide receiver list as well. So I like Jameis Winston against New Orleans. I know the FPA says it's a bad matchup. I think it's a good matchup. And I do think that New Orleans, who has gotten a little bit lucky in terms of touchdowns allowed, I think they're going to get banged this week. I really like Jameis Winston to come through for you folks in Fantasyland this week. All right, let's go. Anyways, that's the show. If you guys would you like and subscribe to the podcast? And would you find me on Threads at James D. Co? And finally, if you want my rankings, if you want my projections, if you want a full list of sleepers each and every week, obviously go to the website, sleeperkingfootball.com. All right, I got to go. But remember, it's never too late to chase your dreams. Peace.